Welcome to Magic is Real, the podcast where we focus on spiritual journeys, near-death experiences, and all things metaphysical and spiritual. If this podcast resonates with you, it would mean the world if you can like, subscribe, and share with like-minded friends. Thank you so much for being here with an open heart and mind. I wish you peace, light, and love always. Welcome to Magic is Real. I'm Shannon. I'm a psychic medium, and I'm the host of this podcast on which we discuss metaphysical topics, near-death experiences, shared death experiences, and those types of spiritually transformative experiences. Today, I'm very excited because one of my very dear friends who is a listener of the podcast, I know you're here, hi Kenny, reached out to me by email, and he's like, have you seen this interview on the Jeff Mara podcast with Jacob King? You need to watch it. I got busy. I forgot. He texted me the other day. I just need to remind you about this. It's important. So I watch it and I'm like, it's phenomenal. It's like really interesting. And Jacob King is with me today. Jacob is a really wonderful speaker and explains things so vividly and has really great insights. But I said, why was it specifically so important? He's like, because I feel like we are looking at one of the next great spiritual leaders of our time. He's like, he's so humble. And he said, also, I just feel like you specifically, I just felt like the two of you had to connect. So that's what brought me to inviting Jacob King onto the show. He's here with us from Melbourne, Australia, where I was born. Thank you so much for being here, Jacob.
Hey, thanks for having me, Shannon.
It's a pleasure. Well, I'd love to get to know about you. I do know about your story, but whatever you're comfortable sharing, your story, you did have a traumatic sort of background. And so whatever you're comfortable sharing would be great, just in terms of who you are, where you come from, what your life was like before this spiritually transformative experience.
Yeah, I've always sort of been very, I don't know, the experiencer of strange things. High strangeness was always a part of my life. Literally since I was born, nearly died at birth. I was born in the backseat of a car on the side of the freeway. And mom said I don't know, but there's conflicting reports from both my parents. My dad says, oh, you were fine. My mom said, no, you came out, you were blue and you were dead and they had to revive you at the hospital. Um, And I went back there in the hypnosis once, and yeah, I did have a very traumatic birth and left my body and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that sort of plays an impact on the rest of my life. My father was a very troubled man. He was extremely violent, like not just like, slap you on the face sort of violence, but he'd do some very terrifying, very torturous sort of things to me when I was growing up. And that really messed me up. And my mom was, I guess you could call her a troubled mystic. She had a lot of experiences as well, but was not very grounded, and she had nasty addiction to pharmaceutical drugs. And yeah, it's just a very troubled childhood. I lost myself in sports for the most part. I had this strange ability to enter into the flow state a lot of the time through sports. I used to play soccer growing up in primary school, and then high school. I had a big growth spurt, and I started playing a lot of basketball. And through sports, I learned a lot about the ego and the flow state, but I didn't know what I was learning. I just knew that when I was playing with friends and it was relaxed, I could do amazing things. But then I'd play in an actual game with a ref, and I wanted to be good, and I expected to be good, and then I couldn't play. I was horrible. And that plagued my mind for a long time. I could not understand, why could I play when I didn't care, but when I did care, I couldn't play. It was strange, and I only started to answer that question later on in my life when I started to understand about the ego and things like this. So, I always had a curiosity about the things I was experiencing growing up. I don't want to get into it too much because it's very sort of distracting, but you name it, in the high strangeness category, I've experienced it. And so I knew growing up that there was more to this reality than what I was told. I tried to be a skeptic for a while because that seemed like the cool thing to be, but I just couldn't discount all the experiences I had. But as I started getting older in my 20s and that, and I realized that I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, which was always my dream. I started to become very troubled, and I started to develop a bit of a drug addiction, and one drug, two drugs, three drugs. Basically, I became an escapist. So I developed the addiction problems that my mum had, and I also was occasionally having very violent tendencies like my father had, and I couldn't control myself, and I couldn't understand myself because I felt like I was the worst part of both of my parents. I had, my mom's instability, but also the mysticism and that too. But I was also sometimes violent and very dominating with other people. And I was like, how can I be both of these things at the same time? Like, what am I? I'm such a mess. I don't know who I am or what I am. And it was tough, so that just led me further and further into escapism. And as time went on, I actually found a great escape for me was through martial arts. Martial arts was the perfect thing that gave me the ability to express the hot anger and the violence that my father had, but also to explore it mystically, like what my mother had. And that was like the perfect middle ground. And I really found myself with that. But then we had the lockdowns in 2020, and I couldn't train anymore, and I couldn't compete, and that was too much for me to handle. I really tried to do the meditation and stuff, and that was good for a little while. The challenge of the lockdowns and being stuck at home, like it did help me explore deeper for a while. I did make a lot of spiritual progress, but not for long. Not for long. After a while, I started getting like really nasty headaches, cluster headaches, and I started getting addicted to painkillers and stuff. And yeah, things just got worse and worse for a while. Come October 2021, and yeah, that's when I had an OD, and that's when I had my NDE, and my life changed from there.
All right. We will get into that in a moment. Thank you for sharing all of that and being so vulnerable in sharing all of that. One thing that I think is really interesting is the minute you said that you had a traumatic birth, I went, yep, this checks out. Because what I've learned is that so many people who have near death experiences later on in their life, it's because when they were born, they had a traumatic birth and their soul left their body. So they came in with this higher knowing, which we all do, except most of us forget it. It's this tether like that we have between here and the quote unquote other realm. And yet people who have traumatic births, in fact, when people I've met have said I have out of body experiences, I've said, did you have a traumatic birth? They're like, yep. And so it's really interesting to hear that. And also, well, we'll get into more. I have so many questions, but first I know that everyone wants to hear what happened, but it's really amazing the way that your life kind of the trajectory, I'm sure you probably would agree. And it feels, doesn't it sometimes feel like, I always say like God could not have written a better screenplay. It's all coming together. So I'd love for you to share what happened to you and what you experienced, because I know we'll be able to reflect back on that and see how this trajectory all feels so sort of perfectly plotted.
Yeah, you're right. But I mean, it was tough when my questions weren't being answered. It wasn't
Yeah.
until about a year after my NDE, that I finally started to piece it together. But what happened was, so I was at home and I was taking a combination of my favorite drugs, and I passed out. And look, usually you pass out from drugs, like sometimes you can see some cool things, but most of the time you just wake up the next day feeling pretty crap. But this time I was fully conscious the whole time, and I was in this black void. And as I was in this black void, this beautiful energy came in there with me, and everything was invisible. But it was that strong that this energy was. The fact that I couldn't see this energy didn't matter because it was so strong, and it was hugging me, it was holding me, And it was the perfect energy. It was really, it felt like the key to my inner lock. The first thing that went through my mind when I felt this energy surrounding me and holding me was everything I was trying to do on earth, I was looking for this. This is the perfect energy. So whenever I had a girlfriend, or and I wanted her to love me a certain way, or when I was all my sports competitions and the drugs I was taking, like the thing I was trying to extract from all my experiences on earth, this was the feeling I was looking for. And now I've got it. So now, for the first time in my life, I actually feel satisfied. I actually feel complete. And I'd never felt that before. I don't think anyone on earth really feels that for a long time, you know? And I was into it. I was just like, great, like, cool, let's keep going with this. As I was just taking it all in, I realized that this energy was familiar. I'd felt it before, but where did I feel it? How can I be familiar with this energy if I was looking for it all my life? And then I scanned through my whole life in about a second and I couldn't find it. And so I thought, okay, if I scan through my whole life in a second and I can't find it, and as I'm thinking that, I've managed to scan back further and I've scanned before my life. And when I scanned before my life, I instantly found it. And it was like between my lives, I realized that this is the energy I was spending time with. And this was God's energy. God is hugging me right now. And I was just like, oh, that's amazing. Now, God transcends gender, but I just find it easier to call God He. So, and that's what I grew up with. So that's what just comes out of my mouth naturally. But so when God is hugging me and holding me, and I'm realizing, it's like that realization sort of opened the doors for me that to really understand what was happening. And the love was so powerful that I was intimidated by it. And you don't get intimidated by love on earth. That's why it was strange, you know, like the love so strong that I was intimidated. And I felt like all the universes and all the living beings in all of existence is running on this energy. And so all this energy that every living being in all the universes, they're running on this energy. And this energy was concentrated in one being, and this one being is holding me. That's how strong it was. But with power like that and the intimidation that comes along with it, I had a choice to make. I could either choose to be afraid of this energy, or I could choose to fall in love with it. And I chose to fall in love with it, to just fall into it. And doing that felt like there was a risk of dissolving completely. You would have experienced a slight sample of this when you ever hug somebody that you deeply love on earth. And, you know, if you really love them, you can just like fall into them. You almost feel like you can melt into their arms as well. Okay, so take that melting into their arms feeling and multiply that a few hundred times. You start to get an idea of what I'm talking about. Like there's a point, if you could really multiply that feeling on earth, like you would pass out eventually, right?
Right.
From the relaxation that comes over you. Um, and that's what it felt like. And you know, and as I went through that, God took me out of this void and I was in this new dimension. And in this new dimension, it looked like space, but there was so many stars everywhere, like like billions of stars. And I'm looking at these stars and I'm noticing that the colors coming off of them are colors I've never seen before. And my mind is blown. I'm just looking at it. I can't believe what I'm seeing. And I'm looking at these stars and I realize that these stars know I'm looking at them. They're conscious, they're aware. Oh, wait, these aren't stars, these are souls. These are living beings that look like stars, you know? I was like, wow. And just looking at it all, and God was, you know, is still invisible, but I know where God is. I can feel God the whole time. And God is picking up all these souls, and then he starts making these beautiful art pieces with them. they look a little bit like the Buddhist mandalas, but more like way more intense than anything you're going to see on earth, like in the intricacy of the artwork and how dynamic it all was. And he's creating these artworks out of the souls. And as every time he creates one art piece, and then I feel like it's so beautiful that it's going to kill me. Like the astonishment was too much. And I'm like knocked off my feet, and I'm looking back at this art, and then I'm just taking it in and wondering how I'm still alive while I'm looking at it. And then God would just wipe it out, and then he would just make a new one. I was like, oh, amazing, And
Yeah.
every time he's doing it, and I'm just amazed and astonished, and God is kind of laughing. God's got a sense of humor about it. And God is saying to me, you just kick back and relax. You enjoy this. I'm putting on a show for you. I'm giving you this service, and I want you to enjoy it. I was like, this is hard to enjoy. It's too much. It's too intense. And after a while, he picks me up and we start flying together. We start flying through this space. And every time I'm flying through, every soul that I'm flying past is having a brief vibrational interaction with me. And this is like giving me love and optimism. And I'm absorbing their beauty every time I go past them. And as I'm flying through love. Like if we were flying on Earth, you're flying through space, you're flying through the air, you can feel the air. I'm flying through the love, and the love is the air over there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And but it's more dense than air. It's so dense that it feels almost like you're swimming underwater. So imagine that you're swimming underwater and you're flying at the speed of light at the same time, both of these sensations combined. And as we're flying, we're going faster and faster and faster. And as we're going faster, I'm absorbing more and more love. And I'm absorbing more and more beauty at the same time. And it's so intense that it feels orgasmic, like the height of an orgasm, and it's just constant. You're just there the whole time. It was too much. I'm feeling overloaded with sensation. And I'm telling God, like, hey, God, I'm starting to feel a little worried now. Like, I'm feeling like destabilized. I'm feeling like I'm going to burst from how much love there is. And we start to slow down, and we slow down, and we get to top of the tower. We get to the bottom of this tower, and this tower is huge. Like I'm looking up at this tower. It's made out of the same lights as all the souls are. Like the lights are dynamic and they're changing in colors I haven't seen before, and it's just amazing to look at. And I can't see the top of this tower from how tall it is. And I'm just taking it all in, and God says, all right, we're going to the top of this tower, this hour. So we start flying up the side of this tower, and we're going to the top. And it is increasing and increasing and increasing. And it's getting so fast that I'm absorbing so much love. I'm about to burst again. And I feel it. And I'm like, oh, too much, too much, too much. And I feel like I'm about to burst. And just as I get to that feeling, we're at the top. We're at the top of this tower. And I was just amazed that I was still intact, because I'm still feeling like I'm in a human body, and there's no way the human body can take on so much. It was a lot like when you're in a dream, when you're in a dream, you feel like you're in a body, even though you're not really. It was kind of like that. Anyway, so I'm catching my breath. I'm at the top of this tower, and I walk to the edge of this tower, and I'm looking off the edge of this tower, and I can see everywhere around me, just all these stars. Beautiful, beautiful. It's like, if you go to the beach, as far as you can see, the water is out there. It's like that. Imagine the stars, And I'm taking it all in and catching my breath, and God says to me, we're going to fly through this next. I was like, all right, wait a minute. I nearly died coming up the top of this tower. And you want me to fly through that? How can I take it? I know if I fly through that, I'm going to die. I'm going to die for sure. And then God says, yes. I was like, what? I thought he was gonna say, "Oh, it's all right. Now you'll be fine. Don't worry." Like, nah, he just said yes, just one word, and I had to think about it for a second. I was like, God is so strong, so powerful, so wise, so loving, so calm, and he just said yes, like it was no big deal. Like, okay, well, if God's not tricking me, because if God wanted me to die, he would just snap his fingers, I'll be dead. And clearly he's got my best intentions here, like he wants the best for me. So I trust him. Like, how can I not trust God? I trust God more than I trust myself. If he says yes, like it's a good thing, all right, I'll do it. So I said, all right, let's do it. And so he picks me up, and it really was like he just picked up a paper airplane, and he just gently threw me out of his hand, and I started gliding off the top of this tower, and it was beautiful. I was just gliding down, and I glided down into the sea of lights. And again, just like before, I'm absorbing all the love and all the beauty, and I'm having a brief vibrational interaction with each light, each soul as I'm going past them. But then the speed starts increasing and increasing and increasing, and it's getting faster and faster and faster. And it's getting to the point where I'm starting to feel like I'm going to burst. But now I'm okay with that. I know I'm supposed to get past this point. And as I started to get past that point, I felt the skin getting pulled off of my face. It was like peeling off of my face, but it didn't hurt. It felt so good. It felt like taking off a tight shoe. And, and then the next layer came off, and it was like another tight shoe had just come off. And I'm flying at the speed of light with all these human layers coming off one by one by one. And each layer that comes off, I'm just feeling better and better and better. Because within all of those layers contained all the pain I'd experienced as a human. And each layer was just coming off. And it felt so good. And then as each layer is coming off and I'm feeling better and better, and then I get to my final layer, and when I got down to this final layer is where I got a little bit worried, because I thought, well, what's after this layer? Like, there's nothing left after this final layer. After this final layer dissolves, I'm done. There's nothing left. And I just said, well, okay, that's all right. And I kept flying, and it was taking a while, and I thought, oh, this is like a very stubborn layer. Like, this layer doesn't dissolve. And kept going and going and going, and no, nothing's changing. I thought, all right, what's up with this layer? This layer doesn't dissolve. This layer, it's completely unaffected by what I'm experiencing right now. What is this layer? And then God stopped me from flying, and he picked me up, and then he showed me what he was looking at from his perspective. And from his perspective, he was looking at a little white light. And he said to me, no matter what you've gone through or what you will go through, all of that will fade away. This is all that remains. This is eternal. Remember this. This is who you really are. And then he rolled me out of his hand like a little marble, and I just rolled out and I joined the sea of lights. And we became one being. Me and the sea of lights, we all became one. It was like a drop of water joining the ocean. And there was no trace of humanity left in me. It was like cosmic love. And I felt like I was one with God. God's essence was embedded in all of us, and we were just one with God, and God was one with us. And it's hard to. Oops, something just fell.
It's just a spirit. Don't worry about it.
This water just fell. I struggle to find the words to describe this experience because, like, to me, it doesn't get any better than that. Like, that was the peak of all experience for all beings. Like, it doesn't get better than that. And but it felt like home. Like I'd been there before. I feel like this is where we all originated from. And I'm assuming that this is what we all go back to. That's what I went back to. And there was no sense of time. I was content to stay there forever. And I don't know. I mean, because there was no sense of time, it's weird for me to say that eventually I came back out of there. That's
Yeah.
where my human brain can't wrap its head around that. But God took me back out again, and he took me out, and then he showed me this image. This image materialized out of thin air, and it was an image of this human body that I'm now back in, and it was passed out. And he said, "No, you have to go back to that." I was like, "Oh, like how am I going to go back from here, and I'm going to go back into that body? Like,
No,
there's a big
thanks.
contrast, you know? It's a big contrast. Like, how? That's too much." And as I'm thinking about it, like I'm thinking, I'm going to go back into the drugs and the depression and feeling suicidal and all this stuff. And it's a big contrast. And then he just said, "It's okay." And when he said it's okay, like the because he doesn't speak in words, it's all in vibration, right? But within the vibration of it's okay was a complete acceptance. Like, I accept you for who you are and what you've turned into and all your darkness, and I accept you. It's okay. I thought, all right, but when I go back there, I'm going to want to tell everyone about this place. Like, I have to, and I started thinking about all my friends and my cousins, and I started naming them one by one. And I was like, okay, I know I'm going to have to tell all these people about my experience. So maybe you can give them this love. And if you give them this love and you let them taste it, then when I tell them about it, then they'll believe me. So can you give them this love? And then he said, "Well, that's what you're there for." I was like, man, how am I supposed to give them this love? This love is too much. I can't possibly give them all this love. That's not possible. And he said, "You can ask me for help. You can ask me to help become an outlet for this love." And I was like, oh, that was like a new concept. I needed time to think about it. And I was like, okay. Yeah, it's very different to how I was doing things back on Earth. I was doing things with my ego and just trying to do everything myself. And you're saying I can just ask you for help and I just like need to get my ego out the way and then your love will flow through. That makes so much sense. Okay, yeah, I'll do that. But things are very different on Earth. Like it's very easy for us to say all this from up here, but when I go back down there and the dense vibration that I'll be in, and things get more confusing when I'm in the human body, and I know I'm just gonna go back to the drugs, but above all else, like I really don't want to lose touch with you again. And then God said, "I am you." And I was like, how can you say you are me? You're too powerful to be me. And then it was like time stood still, and out of the center of my forehead, a giant golden eye just shot out. And this giant eye, it's coming out of my forehead, and now it's looking back at me. And I was confused because I was like, all right, this eye is out of my forehead, but it's looking back at me. Is this my eye looking at me, or is this God's eye looking at me through me? I'm trying to work it out like a puzzle. And then God said, "I am viewing your life through you, as you. You and I are one." And then he sent me back.
Wow, God, that was profound. I have heard from so many near-death experiencers that it's traumatic to come back. And as much as people who haven't had near-death experiences wish that they could because it would be so exciting or beautiful, the reality is most people who've had them are like, no, you don't want to have one. It's not all rainbows and butterflies and stars, souls that appear as stars. So my question is two-pronged. One is, I know it was very recent for you too, so you're still probably experiencing this. Coming back into your body. Well, first of all, coming back into your body. At that moment when you came back, did you have any kind of feelings of like things are going to be different now? Or were you bummed to be back in your body? And the other part of the question is, as somebody who's an addict and who's a trauma survivor, when you were there on the other side, you suddenly felt all those layers had been peeled off. But does that trauma return to you in your body? Has it lifted? And where kind of are you with it now?
So the trauma, most of it was back straight away. Now, the day I woke up, the next day, I was very confused. And I was going through it all in my head, and I was bewildered because I knew what near-death experiences were. Like, I'd looked into that before, and I was just like everyone else. I was like, I wish I could have one of those, because
Yeah.
if I had a near-death experience, I would be fixed,
Mm-hmm.
right? I thought that was, those people were lucky. If you had a near-death experience, and you'll be fixed and your trauma goes away, and that's all. Like, you can't imagine how much trauma I had on me. I had PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
and so I thought, okay, the way I'll know if I really had a near-death experience, not a drug hallucination, is like I would be fixed. But I woke up the next day, and the first thing I wanted to do was roll a cigarette, and I was like, okay, to roll a cigarette, I guess sit at a park and smoke it. And I was like, okay, well, I couldn't have had a near-death experience, because then I wouldn't be smoking the next day. But at the same time, I'm feeling very claustrophobic inside my body, and so I'm trying to piece it together, and I'm looking out, and as I'm looking out at the park, I realize things don't look the same. Like, I feel like like how you would feel if I dropped you into a video game and everything was all pixelated, and you would be like, this is clearly not real. That's how I felt the
Yeah.
next day. And I'm like, I'm not in a, like, am I still in the drug trip right now? Like, that's, I never, if this was a drug trip, I haven't left it yet, because things don't look real anymore. You know? And I was trying to go through it all, and there was actually a quote that, I remember I was scrolling through my phone, I was looking through Facebook, and this quote popped up by an old German mystic named Meister Eckhart, who some of you may have heard of. And I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, my eye and God's eye are the same eye. It's something like that. And it was like eerily similar to what God told me. And I got like really strong goosebumps when I looked at it. And I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure I have had an NDE. This wasn't just drugs, but that means I'm fixed, right? That means I'm fixed. I'm not traumatized anymore. And then I felt this energy like come down, this vibrational energy. And this energy, the vibration within it was telling me, no, you're going to have to go through the healing journey just like everybody else does, so that you can teach others how to heal. And I was like, no, I don't like that answer. I'm going to have to stick with that one. No, I'm healed. I'm healed. I know I'm healed.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I did have to go through the healing journey. But I still was going through my head, like I was having a war in my head trying to figure out if this is real or not. And so the next time I got paid, I was so desperate to go back, I bought the same drugs again, and I tried the exact same thing, and I was playing the same music and same lighting and the exact same time. I thought maybe I figured out some life hack,
Yeah.
and I took drugs, and no, I had an awful time, because the whole time I was like, come on, this is not what's meant to happen. I'm supposed to be there now, and I just had to wait for the
It's
drugs to
like
wear off.
failure to launch. You're just like, ugh, like trying to fly and it's not happening. That's so depressing.
Exactly. I tried it twice, and yeah, so the second time after that was even worse, because I started like I couldn't breathe. I was coughing so badly, and I fell on the floor, and I was like about to pass out just from lack of oxygen. But I was excited as it was happening. I was like, oh, maybe now I'll launch it. I never launched, and after that, I got really mad, really, really mad.
Yeah.
You can't have an experience like that and then go back to normal here on Earth. You know, you honestly, like, even having a girlfriend and making love and things like this, none of that compared.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if, making love to somebody doesn't even compare to that experience? Like, what have
Mm.
you got after that?
Right. From the human experience, that's it.
That's it. There's nothing.
Yeah.
So I got real dark. I got really dark after that, and I was raging at God. So I was like, you know, how can you put me through this? Like, you give me that amazing experience, and then what? I'm back on earth again, and I'm back on drugs and alcohol, and nothing pleases me anymore. I'm in no man's land, you know. I'm between two worlds now, and that was awful. That was
Yeah.
horrible, and I became very suicidal after that. The next 6 months, you know, trying to wrap my head around what happened, and trying to find out, like, how am I supposed to be on this earth after this? That was unbearable. And things started getting pretty intense. I'd be talking to God, and I'm like, you know, God, you're gonna have to figure out a way of helping me to live on this planet, because if you don't, I'm gonna off myself. Like, you know, you can't blame me after that,
Yeah.
really. Like, what am I supposed to do? You know, I didn't have any kids or any
Right.
dependents that were relying on me for anything. So yeah, and I basically challenged God, like, I'll do whatever you need, but you figure out how I'm supposed to live here after this. And what I had to figure out was how to dive beneath the layers of my ego and experience what I experienced in heaven when I was flying and all my ego layers were coming off. And I dived in, and I became my soul again, basically. My my attention and my soul became one. My my awareness, you can say. And I had to go through that process. And luckily I did get there eventually. Get to a place where I dissolved enough ego layers that I could just connect with my soul, and my soul and I became one. And I was just sitting in that place of pure awareness. And I'm not there 24/7, but I can get there instantly when I choose to. I can just dive in and look, I'm there right now. And when I'm there right now, I just feel so much more relaxed and peace, and it's beautiful. Like, there's no, it's like being in a different operating system than what the usual human operating system is, you know,
Yeah.
where the usual human operating system, there's a lot of thoughts, and there's agitation that is like the foundation of the ego basically is like an inner agitation, I feel, where you always want to do something or think
Mhm.
about something or judge somebody or complain about something. You can't just sit and be
Mhm.
at peace, you know. And when I started to find that place, and that was the only place that gave me peace. So I learned the hard way how to tune into that place, because otherwise it was either that or feeling like I wanted to die. So it was an easy
Yeah.
choice. Yeah.
And my question about that is coming from the position of I talk about this on the podcast all the time, that I'm a recovering addict myself, sex and love addiction, and happy. This is like, like a 20-year journey kind of thing. But I understand, like, it really resonates with me, the difficulty. And I'm not a trauma survivor, but I think your brain doesn't know the difference sometimes. I mean, you have your own traumas, whether it's physical abuse or emotional stuff going on. The brain reacts as if the trauma's the same. So, like for PTSD, it doesn't matter what the trigger is, the brain still thinks it's in dire danger. And so it's going to react the same way, whether you were actually physically assaulted or you were afraid of it or you were threatened or anything like that. So I know that it took my entire life to figure out how to get to that place in terms of how do I soothe myself without looking for someone else to soothe it for me? How can I feel better when I'm anxious and agitated? How can I self-soothe? Because all I've ever known is reaching out for external things to make me feel better. And I wasn't an alcoholic, but yeah, it would include drinking to escape or smoking or whatever it was. Um, and when you talk about having to get back to that place, for me, it was just this like trial and error for years and years and years of messing up, having people suggest things. It didn't work. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And then finally having a friend say, "Hey, I can't hear about this anymore. I was in the same place you are. Here's a 12-step program. Go there." But even then it was like this resistance, resistance, resistance. And it took a long time till I finally surrendered and then did all this work for years in therapy and sex addiction therapy and all that stuff. So I know how hard it can be, because you've always turned to the same coping mechanisms. That's your go-to. So I'm really interested to hear for you. I know that you're not saying that you're perfect and you're healed and that it never comes up and that you're never triggered, but how did you personally figure out how to get to that place? Um, I'm assuming I don't know if you did like therapy or EMDR therapy or TMS therapy, but without using those therapies, how did you figure it out? How to get back to that place?
Honestly, it was intense desire to get there.
Yeah.
It's like you have invisible walls, energetic walls, and you have to want to get past it so bad that you kick those doors down, energetically
Yeah.
speaking. That that's the most big. And the way I developed that intense desire was by engaging in my coping mechanisms so much, and that I gave up on using them and not having any other option. It was like, all right, suicide or kick down the walls, you know, because last year when I was going through it all, I was literally spending like, I don't know, $500-600 every 2 weeks or something on my habits, which, and I wasn't making much money. That was the vast, like I was probably spending 90% of my paycheck, of what was left over on my drugs and stuff, and probably 10% on food. Like I was eating once a day, once every 2 days, and spending the rest of my time drinking, smoking, and snorting. And that wasn't doing it for me. Like no matter how high I got, I was not satisfied. And I was like, what's left? What's left? Suicide's the only other option. But there's no way that I had this NDE and this incredible experience, and then I just came back just to get high and die. There's
Yeah.
no way. That doesn't make sense either. Um, and I would always feel like, because there was this increase in psychic abilities and mediumship abilities, and there would always be these funny little things that would happen. Like one time, one of the experiences was, I was really high. I'd been smoking a lot of weed, and I was pretty drunk as well. And I got a little hungry, and I decided to order a pizza. So, I ordered the Uber Eats, and um, I felt like doing something nice for somebody else. And I had some coins sitting there. I think I had like $10 in coins, and decided to gather them together. I was like, oh, I'll give this as a tip to the driver. And as I was gathering the coins together, I heard this voice in my head, and this voice said, "You're gonna be too embarrassed to give that tip." And I was like, "What? Why would I be too embarrassed to give a tip?" Anyway, so I just ignore it, whatever. And I'm holding on to the coins. I'm looking at my phone. I can see the driver approaching. I look outside the window, and out the car, the driver steps out. And it was a lady that I used to go to church with when I was younger. And I was like, oh no, she's going to smell the weed on me. She's going to see how drunk I am. Like, oh man, I can't give her this tip. I went to my housemate. I was like, go get the pizza for me, please. I was too embarrassed to give it to her. And then
That's
I was
funny.
like, damn, like now I got these voices in my head, and what they're saying are real. And like, like if I die, if I kill myself, it's not just me that I'm killing. Clearly, there's like a team around me right now. Like I'm not just living for myself anymore. And when I started to realize that I'm not just living for myself anymore, that everybody's connected to me, not just invisible people who are talking into my head, but clearly it's for a reason. Like there's other people I'm supposed to be helping. And look, isn't that the case for everyone? Like
Yep.
no man is an island,
Yeah.
right? And so I started to realize this, and as I was driving, one day, somebody was road raging me and cut me off in a really aggressive way. And I've had hundreds of times where I've road raged in the past. I have my aggression within me still, and that was my usual response to that provocation. But instead this time I was like, you know what? God bless you. Like you take the space. You have a good day. And I remember as I did that, whew, which is like
Yeah.
10 pounds of depression just came off of me, like instantly. And
Hmm.
I was like, what the heck? Like, yeah. And then I started to learn, oh, doing things for other people without any expectation of reward, like doing things selflessly, like that's a ticket. That's a ticket inside. And I felt like this joy and this peace around me instantly. And I was like, oh, that was easy. Like, all right. So I learned, okay, this is God's hand just guiding me towards just being good to other people with no expectation of reward. There you go, Jake. And it's weird when you do it with no expectation of reward, that's when you get the reward. It's weird.
Absolutely. I'm finding the same thing. Just as I finally found inner peace, I don't people are like, "You're too nice to that person," or "You give too." I'm like, "Honestly, it does not deplete me anymore." I literally love everybody. I literally yeah, people still piss me off sometimes, but I don't let it rile me up the way it used to. Now I just kind of say, "Oh, well, what are they going through?" Or always respond with kindness just innately. And it really your what you've been talking about really brings to mind one of my favorite quotes, which is Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption when he says, "Get busy living or get busy dying." And that's the thing. We can come here and we're going to suffer. This life is brutal, but it's also beautiful. But we just have to be present for that and open to that and to find it where we can. But we come here with every single one of us, right, has this purpose. Even if it doesn't have to be you're this famous person or you um, create this like new invention. It's just like you being here. The purpose is to spread love, is to be kind, is to encourage other people to be kind and to get back to that star connection that you talked about. Because I loved when you were talking about going through the whatever, the vastness and every time you sort of, it's like a ping pong, like the energy between you and the other stars. That's what we're doing here. We just forget that. Like we're all
Yeah.
interacting in these toxic, weird ways or like these awkward ways where we forget that we're all stars and we're all of the same stuff.
Mm. I
And
mean, yeah, we're
that's
literally made of star stuff, aren't we?
Y yeah, that's also one of my favorite, like, quotes is "We are made of stardust," I say it all the time. It's like, that's why magic is real, guys. Like, we have to forget it's hard to forget how dense this plane is, but when things get really heavy, we were made of stardust. Like, "Shh, chill," like, "Relax." And sometimes it's hard because people will try to perpetrate aggression towards you, but it helps if you can kind of keep that center somehow, some way. And like you said, it would be so tragic if you could choose to take your life. You'll be fine. You'll be back where you were. But why were you sent here? Like finish it out. It's like there's so much for you to do here and so much the ways that we touch other people we don't even realize it, especially as addicts who thought nothing of ourselves. We're worthless, we're not lovable. The truth is you are the most lovable and that we're all lovable. But for whatever reasons, we get beaten down and we forget. Like we forget that when people tell us like you're worthless or whatever, and they beat us down. That's when we forget. And so I find it so interesting, and I'd love to hear your perspective on your life path. Do you, from having had this experience, do you believe your soul kind of chose this difficult challenge? Do you think it's just something that happened and you're just being called to navigate it the best you can? What's your philosophy on why we come here in the first place and why we go through such horrible things as you have?
It's not easy to say like it's one thing or the other. One thing I can say for sure is that we're not supposed to know for sure
Yeah.
what's going on here. And that was what came to mind when I was having my NDE and when I was taken out of that ocean and I was shown the image of this human body and I started to remember what it was like to be a human. One of the strongest memory that I can recall from that was looking at that guy who I now am and saying, he's not going to get it. He'll never get it. He will never get it because there's a knowing over there that is not here.
Mm.
And that's part of the experience. It's a lot like when you have a dream. When you're in the dream, you don't know anything about your waking life. It's a completely separate experience. And there's another layer to that here.
Mhm.
Now, I can say for sure that nothing is an accident, especially, the way I was born and having a very violent father and an unstable mother and all of that stuff. Like, that's no accident. It's definitely not an accident. I can say that for sure that we've chosen it. Why we chose it, I'm not sure. But I can say that in my experience from having all that trauma and being able to heal it, there is kind of an alchemical effect with that of turning that lead of trauma into the gold of healing. And it's been amazing. It's really been amazing. Like, because I had such a violent father, it's given me a lot of courage, you know. When I was doing the martial arts and stuff, and and I was getting pretty decent, I knew that I was channeling that violence that I'd experienced into something constructive, and that the guys who I was sparring and competing against, because they hadn't gone through what I'd gone through, they lacked something that I had. And
Yeah.
all the best fighters and the best athletes and the best artists, they've all had trauma that they're channeling into something else, you know. And I was experiencing that firsthand, but you don't get to experience that if you're running away from the pain. You can channel the pain into something beautiful, but when you run away from the pain, you run into it, you know. Um, and that's something that I've had to learn the hard way. But hey, I'm glad I got to learn it. There's a lot of people that never do learn that.
Yeah.
And I really do want to help these people and be like, hey, eventually you can get to a point where you can be thankful for what you've been through. You can be. Now, I'm hesitant to say that for everybody, because since my experience, I've had a lot of mothers reach out to me, and these are mothers who their sons have committed suicide. And it's hard for me to say that to them. It is.
Yeah.
There are some people that I'd be hesitant to say that to, because I haven't experienced that level of pain. I'm not a parent. I don't know what it's like to lose a child. I don't know if it's possible to heal from that, but I'm hoping that there are some parents who have healed from that and who have been able to transform their pain into something better. But all I can do is speak from my experience. And in my experience, like what I've been through, I have been able to heal the vast majority of it, not all of it. Still going through it. But there is something there. It is possible to look back and say, I'm thankful I went through that, because I've gained from it, and now I can help others. And that's very healing.
Yeah, and I appreciate that so much. I think that is so much of what you're here for. And I think the best healers are the ones that have healed themselves. And that's why now I don't look back on any of the pain I caused myself or any of the painful things that happened. Everyone's experienced trauma to some degree or another. And as an addict, we put ourselves through the worst. And just that lack of self love and abusing ourselves and letting other people abuse us, I think, and that doesn't include your father, of course. I mean, later down the line, we set ourselves up to be in these situations a lot of the time, which excludes, familial abuse and that sort of thing, which you have no control over. But as we go through the process, even though it feels like forever, and I wanted to die all the time for like 20 years, all I did was think, I wish I had the guts to do it. I just wish someone would just take me. And thank God I found the healing, and it took a long time of one step forward, two steps back, but it was so worth it in the end, because I've never been more joyful. I've never had such peace. I've never enjoyed life so much. And now I feel so much more able to help other people. And part of that is this podcast, is as someone for us to be able to look at someone and say, I did it. If I can do it, you can do it. That's so much more helpful, I think, I mean, it's all therapy or all healing is a friendship is wonderful and supporting people. But I think it helps when people look at you and say, you don't seem like someone who would have gone through that. I look at you and you seem so poised and so, together. And for you to say, no, I was a mess. I was a mess. I think it really gives people hope. That's why I talk openly about my experience too. And I'm so happy that you are too. I'm so grateful that you are too, because I think we need to talk about it. To let people know we're all human. These are just coping mechanisms in response to trauma and fear and anxiety. We're not bad people because we act it out. It's something we do because we're trying to self-soothe. And once we learn those coping tools, hopefully we can pass them on to other people and show other people that, yes, this life is hard, but it's worth being here.
Yeah, I agree. It was always annoying for me when I was in that damaged state, and I'd see people saying all the self-help quotes and all that stuff, and they hadn't been through what I'd been through, and I was just like
Yeah,
pissed off. Like, you don't know nothing. You don't know what it's like to be me.
right.
I'd get angry. Like, it would just make me worse. It would make me feel worse, because these people they grew up with both parents and a white picket fence, and they've never been hit in their life. Like, you don't know what that is. What, you judging me because for being an addict? Oh yeah, easy for you to
Right.
say. And I was always looking for those people that had been through what I'd been through, or something similar. At least they were damaged and then they'd recovered.
Hmm.
Those were the only people I was willing to listen to. But even then, like, they'd been on their journey and they'd gotten past their point of healing. Me listening to them didn't mean that I could just, oh, okay, now I'm healed. What? Because I listened to you. No, I'm still damaged. Like, me listening to you didn't stop me from feeling damaged. It just showed me that, okay, maybe it's possible, even
Mm-hmm.
though I can't see how it is possible. And I was trying all sorts of things. I tried transcendental meditation, and I'd become a Hare Krishna for a little bit, and I tried being a vegetarian and this and that. And I tried all kinds of things. And it was good for me to try all those things because, yeah, while all of those things helped for a little bit, I still had to go through the process. And my process took a long time. And that's all good. Like, we all get there at a different time. Some people, they're damaged and the first thing they try fixes them. And some people, they're not fixed until, a few weeks before they die.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually you can get there. That's what I can say. Like, you don't know when your time is for death, and you don't know when your time is for healing. Exactly. And it might happen overnight. It might happen overnight after 20 years, or it might just be a slow and gradual process that you look back on and go, oh man, that was a hell of a story that I lived there. But you have to go through your process just like in every movie. Every movie, we watch it for a reason, and there's always that point in the movie where things seem hopeless and you're like, there's no way they're going to survive this. There's no way out of this one. And there is. And that's what makes
Yeah.
it a good movie. The further that movie can take you to that darkness, you know, and then take you out of it eventually in a way that's real, that's what makes for a great movie. And that's what we're all living in our own way. So you got to go through it. And if I can go through it, and I did get through it, then you can get through it too. Like, everyone can. So.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That it really that message is very important to me. Thank you for I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad that you've survived. I know it's going to be an ongoing journey, and I don't mean to make it sound like it's all wrapped up in a tiny bow, but I'm so grateful for you, your vulnerability, for your honesty, for putting yourself out there, because I really do see what Kenny was talking about, that you have so much love to give and so much healing to offer and more healing to do in yourself. But the fact is that you are seriously making the world a better place just by being who you are. Flawed, traumatized, doesn't matter. Like, you are a star. And I just want to thank you for being here so much.
Thank you, Shannon. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I do have a YouTube channel if anyone wants to join. I'm not like It's not like a professional YouTube. I'm not gonna upload every single day. The video quality is pretty bad and stuff, but just every now and then when I feel like sharing something, I will. So if you want to join, just look up Jacob King channels under that name.
I'll have the
Um,
link too. I'll put the link in the description also.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out, get in touch. Like, for serious things, like, don't ask me, like, to tell you the future and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, jacobking479@gmail.com. Um, if I can help you on your journey, like, I'm more than willing. I don't know when I'll get back to you. You got to give me at least a week or two. I'm not the most organized guy in the world, but I really just want to help people. I just, as God told me, I just want to be an outlet. So if I can help you, I will.
Thanks, Jacob.